BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin.
Okay, hello everybody. Today is Friday, another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? Today we'll be discussing the mystery of the Voynich Manuscript, which is perhaps the most mysterious book that has ever been written. This is a topic that has been requested by multiple listeners over the past 2 years, and I'm really trying to make an effort to respond to more of your requested topics. So if you have an idea for a future episode of Black Box Online Radio, feel free to put your ideas in the comment section down below, mostly talking about true crime, but as you see from today's episode, anything is fair game, and I will also invite you to hit the like button and subscribe. Those are some great free ways that you can help out the channel, and there's also a link in the description box to BuyMeACoffee.com, BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88, and anybody who uses that website can make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and they will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. I would like to provide some introductory material about the Voynich Manuscript. Firstly, I learned about this story in perhaps 2012 or 2013 because of those countdown channels that were available here on YouTube, List 25 and All Time 10s. I was a very big follower of those, and I found that even though it was a very, very engaging mystery, their material was a little bit general, so I watched a couple documentaries about the Voynich Manuscript. Oh, let's see, 2013, that's 10 years ago. Goodness gracious, how the years go by. And recently I've been reading up more about the Voynich Manuscript, and I would like to provide an introductory statement that is from library.yale.edu, and that is actually where the manuscript is currently held today. The Voynich Manuscript is held at Yale University, and many call the 15th century codex, commonly known as the Voynich Manuscript, the world's most mysterious book. Written in an unknown script by an unknown author, the manuscript has no clearer purpose now than when it was rediscovered in 1912 by rare book dealer Wilfred Voynich. The manuscript appears and disappears throughout history, from the library of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II to a secret sale of books in 1903 by the Society of Jesus in Rome. The book's language has eluded decipherment, and its elaborate illustrations remain as baffling as they are beautiful. For the first time, this facsimile, complete with elaborate folding sections, allows readers to explore an enigma and in stunning detail. And of course, they're promoting a virtual tour of the Voynich Manuscript, more or less. But it has over 200 pages, and you can actually download a PDF of it online. I got mine not from the Yale Library website, but from holybooks.com, I believe, yeah. And they're just put Voynich Manuscript PDF into Google. It was one of the first sites that came up, and I downloaded the whole thing. And some of the pages actually fold out into fours. One of them actually folds out into six. There are actually 6 different panels to the illustration. But what makes the Voynich Manuscript so interesting is that it's written in a language that no one can understand. And I think almost all of the sources, almost all of the commentaries agree that the letters are not known to any exact language for the most part. But then they repeat in a way where it looks like real words. Because one theory that people have about this document is that it's a hoax. It was just made up. It's just gibberish. And they think that if it were just a piece of gibberish, then it wouldn't have repeating letters in the tradition and fashion of normal words. And I'm going to take a very strong stance. I do not believe that the Voynich Manuscript is a hoax. I mean, it has all of these weird words that no one can read. It has all of these weird illustrations that people can't quite comprehend, and they say things like, well, this looks like some type of plant that we can recognize in our garden, but not quite. I do not believe that it is a hoax. I believe that there are real precise meanings, and I believe that both the words and the pictures have precise meanings. And the reason why I think that it's not a hoax is it would be purely unnecessary to create such an elaborate hoax. You wouldn't have to make hundreds and hundreds of pages that fold out into sixth if you were just making some type of hoax. You could do that with 5 pages or 10 pages. And I also don't think that the letters and the words would repeat in a certain way so precisely if it were indeed a hoax. And there was this one theory out there that Wilfred Voynich himself had fabricated the thing, and that he was just trying to pull one over on people, maybe trying to sell it for profit. But they actually did carbon dating on the paper in the Voynich Manuscript and determined, as previously stated, that it is from the 15th century or the 1400s. So that theory is almost put to death, excuse me. And back in 2013, when I was first looking into this, one of the leading theories in a lot of the discussions that people were having about the Voynich manuscript is that it is an alchemy handbook. And alchemists are most famous for the people being the ones who would try to turn lead into gold. Okay, but that is just a very general statement about alchemy. It's more about extracting the essence of an element and then turning it into another element. But why would they come up with this weird, elaborate way of encoding things about alchemy? Because it was frowned upon by the church, as well as frowned upon by society, and also misunderstood by society. So they created a way to have their alchemist handbook and a society of alchemists have all of their information, which only they can understand. I also do not believe this because I think that there is just insufficient evidence in the illustrations to truly demonstrate that this is something to do with alchemy. Instead, I will propose my genuine theory on the subject, my hypothesis, rather. I mean, we can even say theory because it's somewhat widely accepted. I would propose to you guys that the Voynich manuscript is indeed a 15th century text that is a medical handbook. Most of the illustrations deal with plant life, but some of them deal with bathing in odd solutions. Like one of them is of women bathing in some type of green liquid, and then another one is someone with elongated arms and legs, and then there's also charts of the stars and astrology, or what appears to be astrology, rather. So you have something that perhaps is not alchemy, but rather ethnobotany or something like plant science. But it's just that medical remedies. And I'm not saying that these things would have worked. Oh, no, absolutely not. But you have things like plant-based medical remedies, and the concept of bathing in certain ways is actually a science that is called balanology, sometimes pronounced balanology. The science of studying bathing and the effects of mineral water on the body. That could be one portion of it. And then, of course, astrological connections, connections between astrology and well-being. I think all of that ties into the Voynich manuscript. I think that it is a medical handbook. But why on earth would it be written in a language in which no one can understand? Now, this might sound like I'm projecting my own story onto the subject, but I feel that I have to because, as far as I can see, the only reason why someone would write such an elaborate book in a language that no one else can understand is because it is meant for personal use. Only one person or a small group of people were meant to interpret it or to read and understand it. In the past, I would have thought that there had been a single author, but from watching some of the documentaries that are available here on YouTube, they have shared some other points that there are possibly 2 languages that have been encoded into it, as well as 2 sets of handwriting, and possibly even a third person was responsible for the drawings and the illustrations. But when I said I would share my personal story about this is, when I was 14, over spring break, I was in the 9th grade, I created a similar system, an alphabetic system, or it was a way of encoding the English language. And the reason why I did this was I wanted to start writing a journal, and I created this 27-letter alphabet, not 26, because I really wanted to Well, to have the type of privacy. That's why somebody would create a different alphabet for a known language. And I actually started writing in this script I'll put some of it up on the screen, the characters that I can remember, some words that I remember, but I would just write that way in my notebook every night before bed. And it was purely done because I didn't want other people to read it. It was my own private journal. And I think that that is just the function of something like this, creating a script that only one person or a small group of people can read. It's meant for personal use, and they don't want other people to learn their secrets. Maybe someone thought very highly of their medical knowledge, of their plant science knowledge, of their astrological knowledge, of their balenology knowledge, and they didn't want to share it in unless it was done on their own particular terms. Now, this would be very easy to do because I will tell you this firsthand. I created a 27-letter alphabet of a way of encoding the English language, if you will, rather similar to what we call a substitution cipher. However, there is that 27th character that throws it off, that would throw off basic attempts to solve a substitution cipher. And, I mean, within 1 week, I was able to write in that thing fluently. As I said, I would write in that script in my journal every night, and it was relatively easy to learn because once you recognize that this symbol represents the letter A and this symbol represents the letter B, and then there are just a few tricks to throw in there, you can actually do that relatively easily. So the creation and the composition of the Voynich manuscript would be something that would be very easy to compose, but very difficult to decipher. It doesn't necessarily have to be a substitution cipher or a substitution code. Instead, it could be something to the contrary, where some people use the shifts, where the first letter is actually representing the fifth letter of a language. What do we make of the illustrations of all the bizarre plants, the bizarre bathing rituals, the aspects of the stars that people can't quite understand? That's the same point. Of course, they're not going to draw out something that looks perfectly identical to the plant that it's supposed to be. It's about disguising the knowledge. So says me, anyway. And if you have a theory about the Voynich manuscript, feel free to put your idea in the comment section down below. I would love to read them and try to share your findings, share your observations, and perhaps you can start a discussion of your own. But what about the real Voynich manuscript? Because I, of course, was encoding the English language. What would the origins of this be? Now, even though it's gone through some hands in the Holy Roman Empire, it's been very difficult to determine the exact origin of the Voynich manuscript and which country it was composed in. On one of the documentaries, they said that there have been 22 characters, 22 letters that have been identified in one of the languages. The two languages are referred to as Language A and Language B, and one of them has 22 letters. What types of languages have 22 letters in them? The first one that I had thought about immediately was Phoenician. That's just something that stood out to me from world history class in the 10th grade. The Phoenician alphabet has 22 letters. But then I began to think about some other examples, or just to even just do a quick Google search. What other languages might have 22 letters? One of them that came up immediately to the top of the search results was Hebrew, and this is very important, because I think it was in 2016, two guys were able to decode one sentence of the Voynich manuscript to Hebrew. Now, they didn't speak Hebrew, they used Google Translate to do so, and they had to decipher the message, and the grammar didn't work out perfectly, so that created a lot of doubt. But I mean, something about the Hebrew language also really stood out to me, because if you look at the letters in the language in the Voynich manuscript, whether it's language A or language B, there is a certain resemblance to the Hebrew and Arabic languages, particularly Arabic, which has elongated marks above and below the lines, and even with Hebrew there are lots of elongated marks as well. But one thing that the Voynich languages have is that they turn into more loops and shapes above the letters, which isn't truly found in things that I've observed. But I'm also going to share one particular interjection. If this just were some way of adding additional calligraphy, additional pieces of calligraphy to something like Arabic, or Urdu, or Sindhi, or Farsi, or something like that, people would have recognized that long ago. I do think that maybe Arabic or Hebrew could have been an influence on the creation of the script, but it is more or less an extended variant, or it's so extended that it really is its own creation. But Hebrew is one language that is connected to Judaism. What would be another language that is connected to Judaism or primarily used by Jewish people? Yiddish, language A and language B. And I was also reading up about how Yiddish took place in the Yiddish was expanded in the 9th century, and the Voynich Manuscript comes about in the 15th century. So this is narrowing it down to a possible type of belief system that could have been held to the author. But as I said, I don't really think there is anything in the Voynich Manuscript, from what I've observed, that is about any Judeo-Christian religion or any particular Abrahamic faith. As I've stated very clearly, I think it's more about plant medicine, astrology, and bathing rituals, as well as effects on the body. I mean, that really is what it seems to be about. Personal health, daily lifestyles, maybe even just a health manual, as opposed to a plant science manual or a medicinal manual, would be a good way of looking at it. But some of the letters are actually observable as being almost identical to the English language, and one of them can even be traced back to a language in France, which is no longer used, Occitan, sometimes pronounced Occitan, Occitan, and there might actually be words there that could have been deciphered. So that is somewhat of a connection, and believe it or not, I do think that that is a very strong lead. So it's possible that there could have been a Jewish person in France who was most likely fluent in maybe 3, 4, or 5 languages, and that's just a personal note that, again, I want to share. I think that the creator of the Voynich Manuscript would have had either fluency or a very strong knowledge in multiple languages, and then it wasn't too much of a stretch for them to create their own alphabet for one of them. I do have to emphasize this. Creating an encoded alphabet is so much easier than creating a language itself. And I'll share one more reason associated with that. But then they go on to create this encoding system that only they can read, or maybe there are 3 people involved, as some other people hypothesize. I can't really comment too much on that. And then this is just private knowledge. This is just something that they're going to explore on their own. And they're only going to reveal their medicinal secrets, their health science secrets, their astrological secrets, when it's done according to their choosing. But, I mean, what do you think? What would be some other reasons why people would want to create a writing script that only they can read, that cannot be deciphered by people that are outside of their own little circle, or outside of people who are immediately familiar with this? Why would somebody encode a book like this? Why would some people have some types of bizarre illustrations, if not to just hide their own personal knowledge? And there's some more extreme theories out there that, well, it's the Martians, and this is actually written by the aliens, and this is how the aliens communicated. I'm not really going to comment too much, but I mean, it's an open comment section. You can put anything you want down there. And the final point that I will share with you about my own personal experience is that about a year after I made up that alphabet, which you've seen at least one image of here on the screen, I also wanted to turn that into a spoken language. Maybe just someday, if I were to ever share it with somebody, we could actually have our own type of communications in a spoken language. And I learned that some languages have alphabets like English, right? Where the letter A represents A and B represents B. To start out, A, B, K, D, something like that. And then other languages like Chinese use characters, where the character, the image, the picture represents a single word. Sometimes you need 2 Chinese characters or 3 Chinese characters to be put together to represent a single word. And then I learned that other languages use syllables, so I tried to attach a syllable to each one of the things in my 27-character alphabet, my 27-letter alphabet, excuse me, and that is so much harder. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I mean, because when I say I couldn't, I was expecting that in 1 week I would be fluent in the alphabet the same way that I was in the creation of, well, in 1 week I would be fluent in the spoken language the same way I was in the written alphabet, and that is just so much more difficult. So I think the Voynich manuscript is an encoding system for an existing language that has its own original characters. I believe that it was influenced by the Hebrew language, possibly Arabic or some other Middle Eastern language, but it was mostly connected to Hebrew. Now, this whole stuff about, okay, it had to have been written by a Jewish person in France, I'm not 100% sure on that one. That's just like a possibility. That's just throwing something in the wind. Maybe. But the other parts of that, and definitely about the contents and the reasons why it was concealed, that I have a much stronger belief in. But if somebody knows something that is contradictory, please share. And like, one thing that is so valuable is, if you're going to tell somebody that they're wrong, please provide a reason why. I would love to read your messages down below. And overall, what do you think about the Voynich Manuscript? Do you think that it has European origins, or do you think the language is something more Middle Eastern, as I have proposed? Or do you think that it is something that was just an extremely local, pre-Roman Empire language that was used, and then that it was something that was commonly used maybe in part of Europe, and that it was just maybe passed on generation to generation, and by the 15th century, the last known native speaker who knew how to write it passed away, and this was their final composition? Do you think that that's what happened? I think that would be highly unlikely, because by the 15th century, you would expect that there would be more documentation of a particular language like that, and so, I mean, there would just be a greater understanding through historical records if this were indeed something that was regularly used by a culture in Europe. I mean, up to the 1500s. I mean, if we have, like, languages going all the way back to, pre, like, Christian era, like BCE, you think there would be more documentation of it. But that's not necessarily the case. I mean, again, I'm just throwing out some particular possibilities. But what do you think about the Voynich manuscript? Do you believe that this was a hoax? Do you believe that it was an alchemy handbook? Do you believe it's something that I suggested, that it is a plant science journal, a medical book, a health book, as well as talking about astrology and Balanology? Or do you believe that it is something completely different altogether? And if so, if that's the case, then what? And in conclusion, I would like to thank these sources. Hochelaga, I never heard of this channel before, but they did an excellent presentation on the Voynich manuscript. Hochelaga. I'm talking about languages and I can't get the English alphabet right. Maybe I should stick to my made-up scribblings. But there's also a documentary on the Voynich manuscript available on the channel The Histocrat, and there is even one that is done by TED by Stephen Bax. Very, very interesting presentations, and people put a lot of effort into these Voynich presentations, and the way that the content is structured, and the way that the ideas are shared. I mean, I was actually impressed by the way that they put things together in a sequential fashion, and I also cited the Yale University Library, as well as Holy Books, and some things from the past. So please write your ideas in the comments section down below. One more time, you can hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and even if you didn't enjoy the content, put your idea in the comment section down below. Tell me the reason why you didn't. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and there was always BlackBoxNid88 over on Instagram. And I will see you there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.